I went to a school in those days where you had 4 grades in one room and 4 more grades in the other room. So it was a little 2-room schoolhouse with all 8 grades. And it was an interesting place. One of the things that happened during that time concerned a thermostat, and that's the name of this poem. I'm thinking of a country school some many years ago. It was built in 1911 because the cornerstone said so. I started there when I was 6, got out at age 14, and there was sure a lot of stuff that happened in between. The school was named for Roosevelt, but not old Franklin D., because he hadn't happened yet as far as we could see. It must have been old Teddy that had given the school its name. I am sure that 1911 he was still a man of fame. The old schoolhouse made of brick. 2 rooms was all it had. A coal stove in each one of them, and they was pretty sad. They'd warm your fronts and then your butts, but never both at once. You'd warm your seats and turn around, and then you'd warm your fronts. Sometime in 1933, or maybe 34, the school board held a meeting, and they toted up the score. Those 2 old stoves had nigh blew up the last times they'd been fired, and it was plain to see that a replacement was required. Technology's upon us, and the school board isn't slow, so they installed a furnace in the basement down below. And with it came a stoker that you filled plumb up with coal. A funny little auger shoved the coal up through a hole. Fire would keep on burning, not too hot and not too cold, but all this modern mechanism had to be controlled, so this required a thermostat to tell the stoker when to start the auger pushing coal and when to stop again. The school board did the natural thing and put the thermostat in what we called the big room, where the older kids all sat. The little room was just as big, but held grades 1 through 4, while all of us grades 5 through 8 went in the left-hand door. Each schoolroom had a teacher, and they didn't get along. Whatever one of them would do, the other thought was wrong. So when the furnace was installed, they really went to bat. There's 2 rooms in the schoolhouse, and there's 1 dang thermostat. The teacher in the little room is cold, and then she's hot. The temperature is never right. She thinks it's all a plot. The big room has the thermostat and thus controls the heat, and though it warms them equally, she wallows in defeat. The problem finally reached a point where something needed done. We only got 2 teachers, and we can't spare neither one. The school board had to meet again. There wasn't any doubt. So 3 old farmers, that's the board, sat down to work it out. They all was well acquainted with the furnace, how it ran. They knew about the auger and the stoker and the fan. The big room had the thermostat, and this they also knew, and wondered if the small room maybe ought to have one too. These fellows aren't philosophers, they're farmers, like I said, but each knew human nature, though, and how to use his head. They knew the furnace couldn't heat 2 thermostats at once, but couldn't leave the small room teacher feeling like a dunce. So finally old Charlie says, I think I've got it now, and Dad and Chauncey Loveland says, we wish you'd tell us how. Well, Charlie answered as he stirred the coffee in his cup, the small room gets a thermostat, we just won't hook it up. So now the small room teacher had a gadget all her own. The temperature, like magic, stayed within her comfort zone. She never learned the secret, and I tell it only now, 'cause if I'd told it years ago, it would have caused a row. But still I think of those old boys and how they worked it out, and though I've no philosophy that I can brag about, I've learned it doesn't matter where you've been or where you're at, as long as you are in control of your own thermostat.